In this video, we're going to be setting up the path that the dominoes will be following. To do this, we're going to be using both the spacing and the align tool to handle most of the work for us. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my table and position it where I want it. So all that's all the way over here. Just going to grab that. Let's see, it's in the center area right there, so that's a good start. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click group and I'm going to group them all together. Grab my move tool. Just going to drag down on this axis so that it's closer to the ground. Now, one of the things you'll notice as I pull it closer to the ground, it gets a little difficult to get it set just right. It kind of jumps, so what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use the align tool in order to place it. So to start with, I'm going to go to the new object tab and I'm going to go to my geometry, standard primitives, and I want to select plane. Now if I draw a plane right like that on the top viewport here, it'll set the height of the, it'll set the z-axis of the plane to 0. So this is just flat on the ground there. After I do that, I'm going to go back, I'm going to grab my table, and I'm going to go to Edit, Tools, Align, and then click Align right here. And you see my icon changes to the two boxes over top of each other with the 4 boxes on the left. It's wanting me to pick the other object that's going to be used in my alignment. So if I click on the plane, I get this window right here. This is asking me how do I want to align it. I can align it along all 3 axes if I wanted to. Z-axis is the only one I really care about at the moment. And where we have current object right here, this is asking us what point of the object it wants us to align to the plane. So if I were to click maximum, you'll see the table goes all the way down. So the very top of the table, those very top vertices, are touching the plane. If I click pivot point, the pivot point of my group right there should now be where the plane is. Center, pivot point happens to be where the center is at this particular moment. And if I click minimum, the lowest part of our mesh aligns to it. Now over here, target object, this would allow us to move our target object, to choose the point of our target object. Center is currently selected. It's a plane, so it doesn't matter whether I choose minimum, center, pivot point, or maximum when I'm doing the z-axis here, because a plane has a thickness of 0, and there's no other value for it to land on. So I'm going to be able to just click apply and then hit OK, and my table is now setting nicely on the ground. The next thing I want to do is just go ahead and start defining the path my dominoes are going to be following. So if I come over to geometry, shapes here, and then click line, I can use my line tool to just kind of draw out the path I want the dominoes to follow. So if I zoom in here, I click once, it starts creating the line. I click and drag, it creates a curvature. I can just kind of do something like this. Each point when I click, I'm just clicking and dragging. Get a nice little spiral going here. And then at this point, I'm just going to tell it to go to right over to the edge of the table. Because what I want to do is I'm going to have my dominoes fall off the edge of the table and land on dominoes down on the floor. So now if I right click, that'll terminate my line. So now I can go ahead and grab my line. And at the moment, because I chose to draw it from the top view, it's on the floor. I'm just going to drag it on up. And I'll fix the height to that in a minute, but right there should be a good start. After doing that, I want to go ahead and set my second set of dominoes path. So I'm just going to start my line right here. Let's have it move back underneath the table here. And we'll just end it there. So there's my two paths at the moment that I have. One path is up above the table, the other path is down on the floor. So my next step is going to be to actually put the dominoes along the path. Now, like I said in the previous video, we could manually place every single domino if we really, really wanted to, but instead we're going to use the spacing tool in order to place the dominoes for us. I'm going to zoom in on my dominoes down here. Now I'm going to click on this one. Whoops, still have my line tool selected. Let's turn that off. There we go. Selected that domino right here. I've gone over to the modifier tab. And remember how I said that if you see the italics on a modifier, that modifier is an instance modifier? I want to make sure I grab one of these dominoes with the instance modifier for this step. So rigid body type is set to dynamic. Leave that alone. I'm going to change it to start in sleep mode. What start in sleep mode is going to do is going to have our dominoes not have any physics interactions with them at all until some other rigid body object collides with it. Once another rigid body object collides with it, at that point it'll start having physics applied to it. But anyways, we started in sleep mode. Now I'm going to go to Tools and then go down to the Align submenu, and we're looking for spacing right here. Click on that. And this window right here opened up in my other window. This is the one we want. I'm going to select Pick Path and click on one of my two paths. My count is really high at the moment because it's just remembering the last time I did this, sorry. I'm going to set it back to 3 because 3 is what it normally starts at. And you'll see 3 dominoes on the path. 1, 2, and 3. I want to set these to copy and not instance. And then normally follow is turned off. You want to go ahead and check that box to turn it on. And my dominoes are laying down. We do not want them laying down, so let's fix that. We're going to grab our rotate tool. We're going to come down to the x-axis here. Let's put that at 0 to see if that's the way it needs to rotate. It's not, but we'll do that anyways. Typed in 0, it's now laying down here, but when I click on this window, it shows the orientation of the dominoes. There's no change. Let's try Y instead. So if I take the Y, change it to 90, dominoes now on its side, click back on this window, my dominoes are standing up. Now they are in the ground. That's going to be something we can fix fairly easy. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit cancel. So the height of our domino is 2 inches. So if I select this line and on the Z I type in 1, that'll move the line halfway up into the air. I'm sorry, halfway up the height of the domino into the air. So now if I click back on this domino here, whoops, did not mean for it to actually create the other dominoes yet. Let me just go ahead and delete those dominoes out of existence. There we go. Those dominoes are gone. And my plane is gone. Oops. There we go. Remember, Control Z will undo something you've done. Control Y will redo something that you've undone. All right, so I've selected my domino. Going to go back to Tools, Align, select my spacing tool, click Pick Path, select my path. My dominoes are now set along that path. Follow is still set. And there's a few ways we can determine how many dominoes are going to be in our path. We can increase the count right here, which will allow us to set an absolute number of dominoes. So if I change it to 75, there's now 75 dominoes along the path. The alternative If you'll notice, the spacing number changed when I increased the number. If I set that back down to 3, it's at 51, so 51 inches between each domino. If I click spacing instead, uncheck count, and then change the spacing to 1, it'll take 104 dominoes to have all my dominoes spaced 1 inch apart, and by 1 inch apart, that's 1 inch from pivot point to pivot point. And it'll follow that entire path. Anytime you click out of the window, your dominoes will disappear. Sorry. So if I click apply now, those dominoes are now created along that path. Up next, I'm going to grab this path, and the same way I align the table to the plane, I'm going to use that to determine what the Z height of the top of the table is. So I've got my line selected. I'm going to Tools, Align, Align, selecting the top of the table, or the whole table. And I want my target's maximum and my current object's minimum on the Z plane. So that what that'll do is it just lowered my line down to the exact top of the table. I'm going to click apply and then OK. And then I've got my Z coordinate right here. I want to increase it by 1 inch, so it's at 29.582. Let's change that to 30.582. That's half an inch above the table. Now I'm going to grab this reference domino again. Go up to Tools, go down to Align and select the spacing tool. Click Pick Path. I'm going to click that path again. And because I used spacing instead of count, my dominoes are still 1 inch apart from each other all the way up until that point. Now I may have to move these dominoes still because I don't know if that domino is going to get enough movement off the table in order to hit the ground. I'm also noticing this domino is kind of floating in the air. So, whoops, forgot to hit apply. And my domino is no longer selected. There we go. So those are back. I'm clicking apply, closing out that window, selecting this domino, and hitting delete to get rid of it. Now at this moment, I have not created a collider for my table. So I believe I should go ahead and do that. So I'm selecting the table, and I've got a few options to do. First, I'm going to ungroup it, just because it'll make life a little bit easier there. If I select the outer ring here, and I add a Mass Effect rigid body modifier to it, where are you? There you are. So I've got that added in. Scroll down here, I want to show you what the current shape is. It just says convex. So a convex shape is going to be a shape with no point that goes inward, right? The opposing idea would be concave. So if I switch it to concave, it would try to follow the shape of the mesh and then allow for stuff to go through any holes or through any divots in there. Once you make it concave though, you'd have to come down here and click the generate button for it to actually generate the mesh. I'm not going to do that because every now and then it kind of crashes on me when I do that. So I'm going to put it back to concave. And this is where I give you a little bit of a warning. A lot of times when you're going on this menu over here, the rollout panel, you may want to use your mouse in order to scroll up and down this thing. However, with this rollout panel and with some of the other ones, anytime you use the scroll wheel over top of the pull down menu, you'll see it changes the option that's there. So my recommendation, use your scroll bar just for safety's sake. But change that back to convex, not concave. There we go. And now, because I have the outer ring selected and I selected convex, the dominoes won't fall in through the middle where the glass is either. So I really only need to do the mesh for this particular part right here. Up next, these legs. One at a time, I'm going to add the Mass Effect Rigid Body modifier to it, leaving it at convex. There's not going to be any point my dominoes fall through this middle area, so this will be fine here. However, if I did want something to pass through here using the physics engine, I would have to use a different mesh collider for this. I'm going to do the same thing to each of these. And let me do it to these two as a group real quick to show you why I didn't do all three at the same time. So if I got them both selected, I go down to Mass Effect Rigid Body. Actually, that didn't do what I expected it to do. Sometimes what it'll end up doing is the entire area will be covered as opposed to just each individual object, but this worked as it should have. Good. All right. So table is, it has them all applied to it now. And now up here where it says rigid body type, by default it's set to dynamic. Dynamic means it can receive forces and give forces. This is your standard setting. Everything's going to be set to dynamic by default. Then you have static. Static's the third one down. Static means this object cannot receive forces and will not move. So the only force that you're going to get from this object is when something slams up against it, and then it'll be some type of bounce back force at best. And then you have kinematic. Kinematic is an object that can only give forces but cannot receive external forces. So if an object hits a kinematic object, the object that hit it will bounce off of it, and the kinematic object will just keep on moving as if nothing happened. However, if a kinematic object hits a different object, the other object will get the full force of it hitting, and the kinematic object will again continue moving the way it was as if it didn't hit anything. So if you have an unmovable object or an unstoppable object, you would set it as kinematic in order to get the effect that you want. And this is where we get into the question, what happens when an unstoppable object hits an immovable object? If you're using an engine that's based off the PhysX engine, they phase through each other. Don't really need to show you that, but neither will have an effect on the other, and they'll just pass right through each other like neither thing is there. So for all the parts of our table, we could set it to kinematic. Kinematic, you would set it to that if you expect the object to move at any point, or we can set it to static. This table, we don't expect any of the dominoes to be pushing this table around, so let's go ahead and set it to static. And we're going to do that for each piece that has a rigid body on it. There we go. So those are all now set to static. So the other objects, they'll be able to hit against the table, but they won't be able to push the table out of the way. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate my mouse around here. Now we got these two dominoes down here that are still standing straight up. If I click this one, this is the one that is not a instance modifier here. So I'm going to drag this up and move it over to where the start of my domino chain is. Let's zoom in there. Still a little low here, so let me drag it up a bit more here. And just for testing purposes for the, for the moment, what I want to do, let's position it right there, rotate it so it's facing the other domino, if my rotate tool will cooperate with me. There we go. And then I'm going to lean it towards it. That's a pretty decent lean. And should be close enough to make contact. Yep. Okay. Now after I've done that, I'm ready to test my initial simulation. So if I go up to Animation and click Mass Effect right here, then go down to Utilities and select Mass Effect's Tools, we get this window right here. So on the first tab here, this is just our basic settings here. So we have use ground collisions turned on with a ground height of 0. That's the default setting right there. So your Z height on your scene registers as a ground even if you don't have any objects set as having a collider. Once an object hits that 0 point, it will act as if it hits something. Directional gravities, default set to Z, negative 386.221. That's just our regular force of gravity. Now, 386.221 may seem like a weird number, especially for those of you in physics classes, because you're probably used to 9.8, 9.81, or something like that. Sorry. This is in inches. Keep that in mind. You convert this number right here into meters, from inches to meters, and you'll get the number you're used to seeing in your physics classes. Down here where it says rigid bodies, we have a few options here. It says substeps, solver iterations. We'll talk more about this in just a moment. Let's go ahead and click on the next tab. So these 4 buttons are the ones that we'll spend the most time working with. Whenever you want to figure out what your animation, what your physics simulation is going to do, if you come to this window and you click Bake All, that is going to start your simulation. You'll see down on your timeline right here in just a moment, it's going to start creating keyframes for each one of the objects, showing them falling over. So let's zoom in here. If I drag my timeline right here, first domino fell, they're all falling over, knocking each other over. Something happens right there, stopping my momentum. So let's find out what's happening there. So hits that domino, then stops. So let's see what happens. We take this domino, we delete it, and in order to run our simulation again, we need to unbake all. That removes all the keyframes we made. And as of this version of Unity, there's sometimes a little bug, not Unity, 3ds Max, sorry. There's sometimes a little bug that these switch from dynamic to static. They stayed dynamic this time. That's good. So let's go ahead and bake all again. There they go. So chain continued. Let's see how far that got. So they fall, they fall, they fall. Then we're losing force there. So 1 inch apart. Basically what's happening here is every time we hit these dominoes, we're losing a little bit of momentum, a little bit of energy. It's causing the cascade to stop. So what I'm going to do, instead of wrestling with the dominoes and trying to figure out the new spacing, I'm going to do a box selection of my dominoes like that. I'm going to deselect my start domino, and I'm just going to delete all those ones there. I just clicked the unbake button because I had forgotten to do that already. So once again, select all my dominoes. I'm going to hold down Alt to deselect that right there. I did not select my path, so now I'm going to hit delete. Those dominoes are gone as well. So let's start our alignment again. So I select this domino right here, that's in the right position for our align tool. Spacing tool, sorry. Go to align here, go to spacing, pick path, select that path right there. 1 inch is too close together, so let's try 1.5. A little bit more spaced out. I'm going to click apply. Close out that window, and then I'm going to click bake all. Let's see what happens. And nothing happened. So unbake all. Let's select that domino there. And it got hit with that bug where it changed from static to kinematic. I'm sorry, from dynamic to kinematic. So I'm just going to box select all of these. Delete that one. Remove them. So this one right here got changed to kinematic. I'm going to change this back to dynamic. And then let's do our spacing again. Whoops. Forgot to click the button first. There we go, so there's our spacing. Let's click bake all. And our cascade follows. Now it's stopping before it finishes the cascade. If I drag my timeline forward here, none of my keyframes saved. That's quirky. Let's try that again. Bake all. There we go. My keyframes saved that time. So I move my timeline here. Once I get to 100, my cascade stops. The way I would want to fix that, so let's unbake all. The way I would fix that is this button right here. It says time configuration. It's a little clock with a gear on it. If you click on that, you've got your timeline controls right here. We can set how many frames our total animation can last. I'm going to set this up to, let's say, 900. Now when I set it to 900, what it's going to do after I hit OK is increase my final frames out until 899, so I'd have a total of 900 frames because frame 0 counts as a frame. That's going to increase my overall time for our entire animation. In STC format, estimate 30 frames per second. It's actually just a touch under 30 frames per second, but it's close enough. We say 30 frames per second. So that means my 900 frames is going to be 30 seconds. That's going to be way more than we need, hopefully. So now I'm going to click OK. You can see my timeline is increased in numbers there. Make sure everything's unbaked. I'm going to click Bake All now. And let's watch the dominoes fall. So it's going around the cascade pretty well so far. No issues. Everything's close enough it's hitting. None of the curves are too tight that they um, miss the next domino in the sequence. Looked like we were losing a little bit of momentum there, but should be good to reach the end. Then at that point, the dominoes have fallen. I'm just going to let that finish out the calculations, even though that was way too much time, simply because I want to find out what frame it stopped here. And also because I'm curious how they fell, because it kind of looked like one clipped through the table there. There we go. It looked like that was somewhere around frame 500. Okay, so right there it hits that one. I forgot to kill this domino right here. That's my floating one. So even if I look at where it lands, this isn't going to do me very much good. So let's delete that out. Okay, it didn't quite clip through the way I thought it did. It just kind of rolls over. Lands right down there. Let's see, that's frame. So let's change our timeline to go to 525. So 526. Hit OK. Unbake all. Then I'm going to bake all again. Dominoes are falling. Off screen, but they're falling. There we go. You can see the chain falling on this viewport right here. And false. Okay. Now at this point, what I want to show you is what it looks like in normal time. So that is the actual speed of the dominoes falling if I were to render this out to a video right now. Pretty easy. We hit that last one, it falls. So I'm going to hit the pause button there, move our timeline forward so I can see where that last one is hit. It falls over, rolls off the table, just like before. And it's falling down to this point right here. So when I put my dominoes on the ground here, that is where I want my chain to start. So now I'm going to grab my line here, grab my move tool, just kind of drag it over this way, drag it down. So the start of my line should be directly underneath that domino so that when this domino hits the ground, it will be hitting the previous domino instead. So now I unbake all, go back to frame 1. I'm going to select this domino right here again. Go to Tools, Align, Spacing Tool. Pick my path. Click that right there. And let's go ahead and increase our timeline again. Let's say 800 for the frame count this time. Maybe a little bit too much still, but we'll give it a shot. All right, and now I'm going to click back in the spacing tool because I forgot to click apply. There we go. Going to hit Control Z because I just noticed my rigid body type is set to kinematic again. Back to dynamic. Pick path. Select the path. Hit apply. There we go. Now if I bake all, my cascade's going to fall. And again, while it's doing these calculations for the physics, this is running a little slower than the actual playback speed, so if it looks a little slow right now, it's just because it doesn't need to be full speed to do the calculations, because when we render it out, it's going to set the speed to 30 frames per second as opposed to the physics calculation. That's not good. So it hit my domino, but the domino did not hit the next one in the chain. So let's go ahead and zoom in here. Take a look at exactly what happened. Domino falls, hits it, and knocks it sideways instead. Okay. But when it hits it, it does go forward a little bit before it starts bouncing too far to the side. So what we can do, we're going to unbake all. I'm going to grab this one domino right here, zoom in on it. And I'm going to hold shift, drag it forward like that, make a copy. And then I'm going to click bake all again to see what happens. This time I'll stop the recording and then start it back up once it gets close to the end for you. Okay, so we're on the last stretch of the upper bit of the dominoes there. It's falling, it hits it, and it wobbled and didn't fall down. Alright, so let's take a look at these last few moments here, just to make sure we understand what's happening. So domino falls, kind of rolls off the table there. I'm looking at this top right here to see. Domino's falling down. At that point, it's getting pretty close. So when it hits, it's just barely grazing the corner of this domino. Alright. So plan of action. So it does hit the other one, but it just, again, is just barely grazing it instead of giving it a full contact hit, which allows it to just kind of wobble in place and stand back up. Few things we can do to fix this. We could cheat, which would be changing our pivot point so that it's closer to the front of the domino, creating a more more unsteady domino that'll be doomed to fall forward. Or we can try moving our starting domino back a little bit so it gets a more solid hit on it when it gets hit. Let's try that first. So I'm going to unbake all. Select this domino, pull it back here, and then bake all again. Here comes the domino, hits it, continues our cascade like we wanted. Unfortunately, I'm zoomed in so we can't see anything. And I can't change my perspectives until this is finished. So we're going to have to assume it's actually doing the thing it's supposed to do. Alright, so zoomed out here. Just going to drag my timeline forward to the point where it falls off the table, then hit play. So it falls, they're hitting, they're hitting, they're hitting. I was off by 50 frames, so 1 second. So there we go. Our cascade goes around and falls off the table, starts this cascade down here. So the next thing I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and click Unbake All again. I've got my Weeble over here that we've done nothing with at the moment. We've just added the Mass Effect rigid body. I'm going to drag it over to the end of my chain here. Zoom in. Here's the end of my chain. Or cascade, sorry. Place my Weeble right there. So this domino will knock the Weeble and hopefully make it go a little topsy-turvy. Let's zoom in here. So my center of gravity is actually a little high here. So I'm going to go to the hierarchy panel, effect pivot only, and I'm going to drag that back down just a bit more. Turn that back off. And then I'm going to scroll down on this to where it says vertices. And I'm going to increase this number here. If you increase it too much, it'll start behaving funny. I'm going to set it at 100. And what you'll see is it just creates a more complicated, or more complex collision mesh for this thing. 100 should be good. We'll see. But then I'm going to go back up to the top. Let's drag my bounciness down. Let's go for 0.1. And then let's go ahead and bake the animation to see what happens to our Weeble. So, bake all. And right there, we got a problem. Our Weeble's not standing up. So, I've unbaked everything, and we're going to do a couple of cheats in order to fix our Weeble. First off, select the hierarchy tab right here. I'm going to click effect pivot only. And generally speaking, I recommend against dropping the center of gravity outside of the object. But if we do that, what's going to happen is it's going to try to stabilize with the center of gravity underneath the middle of the object as much as possible, which should stand it straight back up. Beyond that, when this domino hits the Weeble, I'm going to have it push the Weeble out a little bit. So the density right here, it started off as 0.5. I want to change that to 0.01. That also decreases the mass when that happens. That's going to cause the domino to push the Weeble out just a little bit. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the Weeble's probably still going to get caught leaning a little bit on the domino when it hits. But now, just check, make sure my center of gravity is using pivot. Yep. Now when I do bake all, so you see the Weeble right here, it's just calculated the first few frames. The Weeble's still standing. That's good. So the animation should be rounding the bend in just a moment. There we go. Last domino hits it, pushes out of the way, and it starts to kind of try to upright itself, but as you can see from the top view here, let me move my timeline forward here. Domino hits it, pushes it, but the Weeble doesn't get enough distance on it when it gets hit to completely clear it. So it's just kind of resting on the corner, and that's why the Weeble doesn't stand straight up. It's being blocked from doing so. But beyond that, the simulation is a success. Up next, I don't like starting the simulation with one domino already leaning. So this domino right here, it's been good so far, but I'm going to select it and we're just going to get rid of it. After that, I'm going to find our marble. Here we go. Our marble, not our carpet. Dragging that up so that's above the table here. all the way out there. Let's drag you over this way. So right there, it's near the start of our thing. What I want to do with this marble is I'm just going to create a little bit of a ramp to drop this marble to hit this domino right here to start our cascade. I'm noticing when we did our other video, I never put a Mass Effect rigid body on this. I'm just going to do that real quick. And you'll see that the default mesh shape should be, well, it shows convex. Let's change that to sphere. There we go. It's going to be a little bit more accurate than convex for the geosphere. So that'll work there. So what we need to do is we need to first make our ramp, put our marble on it, and then just have it roll and hit this. Making a ramp's going to be relatively easy for us. So click New Object. You're going to go to Geometry and select Box. Just going to start my ramp right about here. And it's all the way down on the ground at the moment, so let's lift it up and put it on the table. Going to rotate this way so this flat edge is aimed at the domino we want to start the cascade. Currently the ramp is up in the air. Let's just drag that down. Make it a bit longer. Let's drag it away. And height segments, I'm going to change that to 2. See the line going across it right there. Width segments, I'm going to change that to 2 as well. So we got that line right there. And then length segments, let's do 2 there as well. Let's increase our height. So right here, let's just drag that up a bit. Let's go with right there. Then I'm going to add an edit poly to this. Vertex selection. I'm going to grab that vertex right there. Just kind of drag down like this. Get a nice little channel going on right there. Grab these 2 vertices. Drag them down like this. These are going to be kind of a guide for our marble to guide it towards that. I'm going to grab my marble. Maybe. Oh, I got to turn off vertex selection first. Move it over top of the channel to begin with. We're actually going to start the marble up on the platform and use the force to push it down in the end product. But for now, I'm just going to start it on the channel. So if I put it down to right about there, I don't believe it's clipping through, but just to be safe, what I'm going to do is I've got the marble selected. I'm going to go to Tools, Align. I'm going to click Align. I'm going to click that. Make sure we're using Z only. Minimum, maximum. That's not quite right. Forgot it's not going to work on the crevice there. Anyways, we'll just put the marble there. It's currently set to dynamic. And let's increase the density of this, or if you want, you can increase the mass. Either way, this is going to increase either one. It increases the other one because these are locked. So for density, let's say 2. Actually, what's the mass of our dominoes? Our mass of our domino is 0.006. Let's make the marble heavy. So let's go with 0.01. So a bit heavier. Now this right here, I need to add a Mass Effect rigid body modifier to it. There we go. If I scroll down here, I am looking for my collider type. If I leave it at convex, this is just going to be a flat plane instead of a little gutter there for the marble to go down. So I'm going to change it from convex to concave. Scroll down a little further. Then I'm going to hit it, improve fitting, and then generate. That creates a collision mesh that should be following. Ooh. See that line right there? That might be a problem. It might be stopping our marble when it hits. Let's go ahead and bake and find out. So let's zoom out here. Click bake all. And our marble will start falling. And hit the domino and proceed it. And the marble is just going to keep rolling until something stops it or it runs out of momentum. Runs out of momentum. So from the friction against the table. Yeah, said that weirdly. Sorry. So I do want to take a look at those first couple of frames because it looked a little weird to me. So let's just roll forward. Looks like the marble. Oh, you know what I did? Don't know why the marble is hitting it before it should even begin. But there's a couple of things that are not right here. So let's unbake all. Got this selected right here. Forgot to change that to static. Let's see if that changes how we generate our holes. Nope. Okay. And let's change this number then. Let's try 256. Still got that going on there. Working. All right, so let's try baking all, see what happens with our marble and a domino now. There we go. So that's just going to continue baking all the way up until the end. Just let that play out and then we'll show you the video. All right, so let's rotate it around like this. Position here, we should see everything there. So now if I just hit play, marble falls, hits the dominoes, and we watch our cascade go all the way through. Now, this is going to complete this video since we've got our cascade sequence set up, we've got our marble functioning, and we got our Weeble functioning. That's our goal for this video met. In next video, we should be looking at forces, some steps on how to mess around with fluids with this particular project, and camera work. Thank you for your time.